Hello, John Hunter with REL here. We're here to discuss the actual setup, the physical setup of REL 6-packs. Now we have another video, and we'll place a link with it on there that actually discusses the entire philosophy of why we do line arrays and what the objective is and how you accomplish that. And we'll get into that a little bit here in a moment. But really, this is a pure technical setup video. We've received hundreds of requests from people, either professionals working in the field who want to know best how to help their customers achieve what we're talking about, or very, very knowledgeable audiophiles who feel like they're able to do this themselves and really could just use all kinds of pointers on step-by-step how to accomplish that. So this is less of a kind of philosophical rant about how we do this and why we're doing it, and much more so about the nuts and bolts of how to actually do it. Step by step, sub by sub, what adjustments I'm making, what I'm listening for. As you look around, you're going to notice something. This may look very different when it's physically set up than a typical REL setup. Remember, in a normal REL setup, especially if you're dealing with one of the smaller ones, you'll often find yourself situated very close to a corner, and that gives tremendous low frequency reinforcement, and it usually gives you the longest throw in the room because you're going from one diagonal to the other. It's a great thing to do. When we start working with 6-packs, we're much more concerned about speed and perfect timing with the main speaker. Remember, we have awesome amounts of power and swept volume at our disposal that we don't have when we're dealing with one or two smaller RELs. On a Carbon Special, for example, an upmarket version from this, we have 1,350 square inches, roughly 8 square feet of sail panel that's moving a long way. And we have, gosh, 6,000 watts at our disposal. So that kind of horsepower means that you don't have to worry about having enough to actually energize the room. What we do have to do is get perfect collaboration, absolutely snap-on timing between the sub and the main speaker. If we don't have that, we're operating at cross purposes, and we're talking about down to a 32nd of an inch. You're moving these things tiny increments to get it really snugged up to exactly being on the pulse of the main speaker. All right, so this is a classic rookie mistake I see. I'll call ahead to a store, for example, that has brought in a line array for the first time, and they go, what do you want to have ready for yourself when you come in to do this? And I tell them very specifically, what I want is all 6 units out of the box. I want their AC mains power plugs plugged in to the wall, and I want them on. Do nothing more than that. And inevitably, what I walk into looks exactly like this. Now, these are our smallest units. These are the S510s. They only weigh roughly 80 pounds a piece, so 3 of them are only about 240 pounds a stack. Believe me, especially when you're working on carpet, moving 240 pounds with a grippy surface on the bottom of the rails very precisely is a non-starter. So if you're gonna do it, start with all 6 plugged in, let the power supplies charge up overnight if you want, fantastic, one at a time, because as you'll see, we're gonna jump into step 1 right now. You only need one to get started. Now, it goes without saying, for those who are experienced, you absolutely have to have your main speakers dialed in perfectly. Do not start this with a half-baked, bodged up set. You need to get the mains dialed in as perfectly as possible. Every aspect of it. Don't worry about dialing in all the fine-tuning of room treatment and things. You can do that after you've built the entire set. But the actual physical positioning, every bit of it, the anchoring, getting your toe in perfect, getting your rake angles right, and lofting that big 3-dimensional image is critical. You do not want to do this a second time, trust me. Now, obviously, looking at this ensemble, something's off, right? This is a 20-year-old pair of very dated Sonus Fabers that we keep around. We brought them in simply as a prop so that you would have something that your eye could relate to in the setup. A quick note, if you're not using cut 4 on sneakers, good luck to you. You have 0 chance of getting this right. Go buy a copy of it. It's available on Amazon. It's $11.98. It's the best money you'll ever spend. All right, let's jump in. First thing we've got to do here is adjust gain, crossover a little bit, phase. All we're trying to do, first of all, phase is critical. You're always listening for the loudest output. It's not complicated. Don't play Johnny Audiophile at this point. It doesn't matter what it sounds like. One is louder than the other. That's inherently correct. That means it's actually doing exactly what the speaker is doing, and that's the only thing we care, is that both pistons are moving in exactly the same way. If you start getting guys listening for delicacy and all this crap early on, you're gonna be wrapped around your axle all day long. You're never gonna understand what you're doing. Louder is better, end of conversation, right? So come on over. There are real clearly defined, very delicate click stops. Each one of these pots has 40 decrements, 40 individual little clicks. And so it's down all the way. I'm gonna start slowly bringing it up. This is gain I'm chasing first, and then I'll go back and do crossover. 1, 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm gonna come back over to crossover. 10, I'll come back to that. Over here, 11, 12, 15, 16 clicks. It's loud, but I'd rather have it be a little bit hot right now. And one more. All right, I've got a pretty good starting position. So I'm over at 16 on gain and 11 on crossover. And let's get started. Here we go. And I'm gonna draw this. Never shove from behind. You never know what you're doing shoving something from behind. You really want to draw it physically to you in a very precise pulling motion. So here we go. What I'm listening for is I'll be pausing every time there's a deep bass pulse. And I'll be assessing, is it really in time and in sync with the main speaker or not? If it isn't, I'm going to discard it and keep moving until I get absolutely perfect. When I get close to the very end, I may miss it, I may overshoot, go back, reset it, and then I'm going to be fine-tuning little tiny incremental shifts of toe in and even direct movement inward if I need to get it really linked up perfectly. There's no way to short circuit that. I've got somewhere around 7,000 or 8,000 sets under my belt. I'll do this quicker than you will, but these are the exact things that you're listening for. All right, here we go. Is a good one. And not bad. Ooh, we're getting really close here. Hang on. Overshot it. I'll just go back, bring that through again. Don't ever try and go backwards. It's just pointless. Go back past where you know it is and just draw forward again. And we're getting close. You can feel it. It's getting bigger. A little bit more. Oh, perfect. Right on. Now, toe in produces more clarity. Just be very careful not to overdo it. I'm going to be toeing around this front corner just a little tiny bit. A little bit. Ooh. All right. And let me see if I can get a little better sync with the main speaker. And perfect. All right. We're done. It's exactly on pulse with the main. You can hear it when it pops in. It's subtle, but really precise. If you've done it 500, 1,000 times, it gets easier and easier to hear these things. But you're listening for that moment where the bass drum, the impact, and remember this is a big, like 37-inch concert bass drum. It's pitched very, very low. And you're not just listening for the initial strike of a very soft mallet on the skin. When you get it exactly right, you're actually hearing the internal compression wave hitting the second skin. So when you get it synced, you hear this ba-boom, ba-boom, because it's the initial strike, and you're so on point with timing that you're actually hearing that skin depressing and moving the outer skin out just a little bit. And it's magic when you get it, just ba-boom, ba-boom. We call it a double tap. You're right on, okay? So that's that critical first move. And you can see we're very close, but actually slightly behind the main speaker. That's pretty ideal because we really don't want the stack to be occluding the spray pattern of the main tweeter, the mid-range, all of that. So when we get done, we'll actually have a nice dispersion pattern that doesn't intrude on what's going on with the main speaker. So the first thing as we move into step 2, we're gonna be dialing in the right channel's anchor, right? So I'm gonna unplug the speakon on the left one that we dialed in first. That will no longer be in the equation, and I'm gonna plug in the right channel anchor, do exactly the same thing that we did over here. I'm gonna be working on positioning, gain, crossover. The only thing I don't have to think about, remember, is phase. I know that on this one, I'm on the inward position. I'm going to use exactly that one. It's just a setting. We're going to hit it and move on, so we don't have to sit there and think and guesstimate on phase. Okay? So, first thing I'm going to do is remove the speak on over here. No sound. And now I'm plugging it in on the right anchor, and I'm going to go through exactly the same set of judgments and listening. I'm going to bring my gain up, I'm going to bring my crossover up, and then I'm going to physically position it, and I'm going to get it locked up perfectly with this one. Again, don't be surprised if your gain and crossover settings are different on this side than on the left side. All right, so we've got both of your anchors built, right? Remember, these are the ones that are responsible for deep bass. So both your left anchor was built, your right channel anchor was built exactly the same way, no deviations from that. You feel pretty confident about that. Now we begin to build the verticality of it. You don't have to do any physical positioning. I want to be very, very clear, right? At this point, you're literally stacking, and I work really hard. I get down over the top of the cabinet, stay with me, and I literally am looking over the very edge of this to make sure this is a perfectly aligned vertical coupling. Here, I check my sides, make sure everything is exactly square, and that's how you move it. You're talking about tiny, tiny 32nd of an inch increments. You want this exactly in level, fore and aft, and side to side. So, let's review briefly. What is the purpose of the second one? The bottom one is that deep foundational bass. Everybody who's familiar with REL has done that a number of times in their lives. Now we're going into uncharted territory. What's the point to this? First of all, the only thing that's going to be playing when I do this is, again, the center level here of the first stack, excuse me. And what I'm listening for is mid-bass attack, right? I'm not listening for the deepest bass. I'm listening for really perfect, crisp intonation, right? So I'm listening to how that mallet strikes the skin of the bass drum, and I'm getting it tuned so it's clear, concise, and has the right amount of mid-bass attack. I'm not worried about getting the deepest, lowest bass or what upper bass partials sound like. I just want to make sure I get that firm middle bass strike, and that strike is the sound of the mallet hitting the skin. All right, let me come over here, and I'm going to be making at this point only adjustments. Remember, I don't have to worry about phase. It too is set to the inside position, just like the bottom one is. And I'm going to be bringing my gain and my crossover up. So first things first, speak on goes in, click, here we go. And $12, try 13, sounds a little fat, but let's see. And now I'm bringing up the crossover. Seven, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Don't be surprised if the crossover is a little bit higher than the one on the bottom, because again, the only thing we're worrying about tuning here is getting that mid-bass strike right, and that may have to go up a little higher in frequency to capture that properly. 13, 12. I got 12 over here. All right, so now, and I write these down, I'm at 12, 12. 12 for gain, 12 for crossover here. So we've now built up the center on the left channel. We're going to do the same thing on the right. Remember, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to immediately unplug the lone speak on over here, make sure it's making absolutely no sound. And you're now going to take the speak on from the bottom unit over here on the right-hand channel. You're going to plug that into the upper one. So again, at every point you're doing this, right up until we plug all 6 of them in together, you're adjusting exactly one subwoofer at a time. Nothing else in the room other than the speakers is playing. And so what we'll do is, again, just make sure our phase is automatically set to the left hand, if you will, the inside position, and go through, and we'll do exactly the same thing as we just modeled over here. We're going to bring up the gain 1 click at a time. And once we get an approximate level, we're going to bring the crossover up click by click by click. And as I said, over here, don't be surprised if you've got actually lower gain settings and slightly different crossover settings than you had over here. It's the most normal thing in the world. So now we've moved up to the third one, right? First thing we do is we make sure that we've undone the speak on the right channel middle sub. The only thing that's now going to be playing is we're going to plug in the speak on here on the top one. We're going to dial in individually this top left subwoofer. Let's review what we're listening for though. This is a little different yet again, and it's a slightly different listening skill. You're going to love it when you get it done. This one is all about all that air, the air in the concert hall, the delicacy, the shimmer in music. If you're into classical music, you'll hear things like brass that glints in the light off of the stage lights. It's crazy the amount of detail that you don't realize actually originates in bass and then goes straight up the harmonic scale. It's troubling, but believe me, it's a wonderful thing when you get it balanced perfectly. So what we've got here is exactly the same thing. I'm going to plug in the speak on. I don't have to worry about phase. I'm going to make sure it's clicked over to the center position, the inside position, and then I'm just going to go through the exact same things, but this time I'm listening for delicacy and reach up into the middle bass. I'm no longer even worried about the middle bass that's going on here. It's middle to upper bass, that transition between, say, 60 hertz kick drums, right? 50 to 60 hertz, that thumping, banging thing that the mid bass gives you. And now we're worrying about that transition really between sub bass as a concept and the main speaker. And we're able to do a perfect, delicate handoff, this beautifully filigreed handoff between the sub bass stacks and the main speaker, and get this broad, gentle plateau of handshake between the two. And when you get that, that's what gives you all of this elevated harmonic response. So follow me over here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to plug in the speak on and make sure the phase is in this inside position. And I'm going to start counting off. Let me get my pad here because I'm going to want to note these things down. And I'm going to start bringing this up a click at a time. 4, 5, 6, 7, 15 clicks up. 16 sounds a little fat, but leave it at 16 for a moment. Bring my crossover up. 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15. A little hot, back down to 15 here. All right, so I wound up at 15 here and 15. That's actually quite a bit higher in crossover. So the bottom was at 11, 12 clicks. This is now winding up at 15 to get that upper mid bass handoff that I'm looking for, the delicacy. We're now going to do the final step in rough tuning, right? And that's to make sure this is unplugged. We have absolutely no sound coming from this stack at all. Nothing coming from these two lower ones. I'm just using the same high level connection to the amplifier. And I'm gonna plug that into the top one. We're gonna rinse, repeat. We're gonna do this first, and then we're gonna move on to another stage where you start fine tuning. Within that, you're gonna plug all 6 in together for the very first time. And you're gonna think, oh my God, that Hunter's an idiot. It's way too loud. And of course it is. We have 6 subs, each individually tuned to be approximately enough to actually underpin the entire system. So we're gonna need to back off on the gain a little bit on each one of these subs. Last and final tip here, and this is why it's so important that we use 3 in a stack. It's really important to understand, often as you get deeper into fine tuning, you'll find yourself really struggling with, okay, the overall sense of this is great, but it's too weighty, it's too thick, there's too much heaviness to the sound. I want it more airy, crisper, tighter, got it. Your first cue should be, consider turning down the mid units. Why? And this is why we use 3, or in really, really big rooms, 5 in a stack. That center sub, bizarrely enough, is the fulcrum, all right? It's very easy to get too much mid-bass attack. It's kind of addictive. It's one of those things that if you're a car guy, it's like having more power. You can never have enough, except you can in audio. And so what winds up happening here is if it's pushed just a little bit, 1 click too hot, everything's gonna sound really thick. Voices are gonna thicken up, you're gonna lose articulation, you're gonna lose detail, everything changes. So it's not unusual at all. And sort of put this one in the back of your brain as you're looking down at your numbers. Our stacks wound up this way. It's not unusual for the top one and the bottom one to have numerically higher volumes, gain settings, than the middle one. So as you're doing this and you're looking down at the end of it going, I don't understand why I've done everything perfectly the way John said. And you look and go, wait, so on the left I got 15 for the top. Let's say that you had 15 for the middle and 13 for the bottom. You should be going, he said something about this. Pull that middle one down and everything will clarify. Right, so you've done each one of the 6 subs individually. Now's the time to actually connect them all up for the first time. And you do that with these specially built baseline blue adapters that we had created just for this adapters. We call them line array connectors. And these are what's used short jumpers to go from bottom to middle and from middle to top in each one of the stacks. The way that you order these on our site is they come in pairs, and you'll need 2 pairs of it to complete an array. The original will either be done typically with hard wiring, and we supply those cables. You'll want to probably get a baseline blue for that as well, but a long one, and then one to the middle and from the middle to the top. Now, for those of you who are using this in a theater context, you need one more cable package. You're going to need a short RCA like this one in order to connect from the lowest unit, LFE, and jump up to the middle unit, and again another one to go from the middle to the upper. So total of 4 RCAs, short ones, needed for jumpers. In addition to that, you'll need your full length ones to run out from your processor, your AVR, over to the bottom one. Really, really important. Do not miss this step. You will be really sad if your beautiful RELs wind up vibrating off and falling onto the floor. Remember, I told you so. Every one of the RELs that we ship comes with 2 of these. Every one of these 510s, 812s, carbon specials, 25s don't need it. They weigh like more than an aircraft carrier. These are couplers. They come with the bolts that are required, and in the back of each subwoofer are 2 fixtures that are actually inset into the back of the cabinet. So important when you get all 6 of these up and running to bolt these on before you get too excited and you start running off to listen and you forget, and you turn the whole system up to like get it to break in even faster, and you come back and you've got a subwoofer destroyed on the floor. And we supply the bolts with them, and it's extremely important you snug those bolts down. Don't try and show that you're Arnold Schwarzenegger on steroids or something. Just snug them down and give them an extra quarter of a turn so they're really good and tight but not overstripped. Okay, so great. At this point, we've got a primary set done. You've got your basic gains, your basic crossovers and things. This is the really critical part. This is the part that makes the difference between magic and just lots and lots of bass. So what we're gonna do, I'm gonna come out here and do a little bit of careful listening. And what we're listening for is really basic things at first, and we're gonna dive in a little bit more. Left half, right half. Do we have that basic balance right from the primary listening position? And as I'm doing that, I'm also listening to hear if anything is louder, if it's stepping out, we call it. If the upper one here is too loud, the lower one there is too loud. We want to get those sort of hangnails that are sticking out trimmed back down so that we really have a good, tight, beautifully balanced, and very vertically accurate kind of a soundstage being projected by these. So I'm going to come out here, do a little bit of listening, and I'm going to tell you what I'm listening as I'm hearing it. Then I'll make the adjustments, come back over. This fine tuning is critical. If you don't get this right, you don't understand what a line array is about. Your friends will come over and ooh and ah about how much bass there is. You will not hear the precision, the focus, all that air, everything that it's really supposed to convey. All right, here we go. Okay, so what I'm hearing here is substantially louder sound on the left half of this stage. This whole stack is going to have to be trimmed just a little bit. I'm also hearing the bottom one is stepping out. It's clearly noticeably a click or two too loud, so I'll make that adjustment in addition to just sort of pulling the entire thing down. And on this one, generally sounds pretty good. I'm definitely hearing an overabundance of output from the top one. So right off the bat, I'm just going to make the overall level check here. I'm going to take this one down a little bit more, and I'm going to reduce the gain on this one a click or two. And you can hear all of these things from there. I mean, you certainly will go back and forth, but as you're making these adjustments, don't worry that you're going to be making these adjustments and you can't tell anything. Oh my gosh, I can't. You will hear 95% of the moves you're making from that position. All right, so here I go. I'm going to take each one of these down one click. And because this one was too loud, I mentioned earlier, I'm going to take this one down a second click and even a third click. Perfect. There we go. So this stack is much better balanced, and this one was sticking out just a little bit. I'm going to take this down one click. Perfect. And I say perfect because you can hear all three of the subs snap together. When you get this change made, this kind of a change, it's not subtle. You hear everything start to snap into focus, even from behind the subs. All right? Don't be surprised if as you do this and you start to sort of finely titrate these things, right? Don't be surprised if you make 3 and 4 trips. All I did was get rid of the biggest, most obvious errors. Great, that one's no longer booming, that one's no longer squawking at me, wonderful. As you start using secondary references very late in this process, that's the point that you go to other cuts that you know very, very well off of the primary tuning piece. We use Sneakers from cut 4 from the soundtrack to Sneakers. And it's a magnificent tuning tool, but at some point you're going to want to put in some additional secondaries, and that's when you start getting really picky, going, okay, that's perfect, but I'm hearing just a little bit too much out of the mid-bass one, and I turned it down a click, and it didn't really resolve it. So I brought it back up because it was losing energy, and then you start sort of racking your brain going, well, but wait, if it's not gain, what is it? The only thing it could be is crossover. So don't be afraid at that point to make very small incremental changes of the crossover. Maybe it's one click too high and you drop it in and all of a sudden everything gets clear and resolves. Great. Every time you make a click adjustment, write it down. I do these little handheld sketches when I get done, at a major reviewers or at a trade show. It looks like modern art. I've got 10,000 scribbles on this thing, and then I'll circle the final sets for both gain and crossover. It's a mess. But be that organized, be detailing every little thing. The last thing you want to do is make a click change, get back at thing, okay, I think that was okay, and you start moving over to the right-hand side, and you're all hyped up, and you've forgotten everything. And you're going, oh crap, was that the middle one I made that adjustment on, and did I go up or down a click? Don't do that. Just keep a pad with you, note it, be very calm, be very methodical, and you'll get through this. Okay, well, fantastic. You can see how much work went into dialing in 6 subs for high level. You've got that all dialed in and pulled together. If you're doing theater, there's of course the whole business of 0.1 LFE. And we've got a separate video of that you can take a look at, and we'll be giving pointers along that way. Understand that what we recommend you do, first of all, is to go inside your receiver or AV processor's settings. And when you go into the bass management settings, you have a choice of where to cross over. We generally recommend you start at 200 Hertz. That's, for most units, it's about as wide open as they can get. You can then, if there's just simply too much upper and mid bass frequency stuff leaking through into the 0.1, you can then carefully, judiciously chop it down. I find that 120 Hertz setting often works the best, where you wind up in concert with the filters that we already have in here, getting a really nice natural setting for the crossover. And we'll walk you through all of the settings for 0.1. It's much quicker because you don't have to play around with our crossover, and it's really simply about putting the biggest, loudest transient in one sub at a time and finding out where the absolute max limit for this system is, right? You find out the biggest, baddest 0.1 LFE effect you've got in your stable. You take your entire system up to that level and you go, okay, I can't run that cut louder than 73 on my processor. Great, I'm at that. And you start bringing up the gain while you're right there listening for overload. You bring it up, the moment you hear overload, back it off a few clicks. Go on, do the second one. Exactly the same issue. So it's really very simple to do conceptually. You will have to do it after you've dialed in the high level. Whew. All right, that was a lot of work. Congratulations. You can see how it's really critical that you do a step-by-step approach to this. You know, I think one of the fun things to do after you've done this, and listen to a few cuts and just go, oh my God, my brain is like wrecked at this point. I can't believe what I'm hearing. It's really, really useful and educational to deconstruct the 6-pack a layer at a time. It's really troubling if you've never done it, because you will literally hear, if you're listening to, well, actually look at a movie, right? You've got this huge 12, 14 foot screen, and you take out that top stack and you lose literally the top half of the screen. It just literally drops like a down elevator, and you literally are hearing only mid-screen down to the floor. And you then take out the second layer, the mid-bass layer, and everything drops to below screen. And you've still got a pair of RELs. There's still tremendous bass in the room. It's not an artifact. You're not imagining this. It's exactly what happens. This is why it's so critical to get all three of these layers working perfectly. It's something that for 2-channel is utterly holographic. If you've never heard this, it's truly disturbing. When you finally hear what's actually buried in your system, it's there. You're not making this up. This is not an artifact. You're not constructing something out of whole cloth. You're actually just restoring it to everything that's there in the master tape over in the control room over here. You can get so much more of the experience we're all looking for so much less by going the line array approach than anything we've ever come across. It's just transformative.